Biggest weapon that the devil is using against many preachers nowadays is, I don't want to offend people. Before many pastors preach now, before they even open their mouth, they have to apologize. They are so apologetic. It's unbelievable. It's unreal. It's insane. How they have to apologize many times before they even start preaching the word of God. God did not call cowards to preach the gospel. He did not call wimps to preach the gospel. He did not call motivational speakers to preach the gospel. But he calls soldiers, warriors to preach the gospel. Do you hear what I'm saying? In this verse here, Jesus fed 5,000 people. He did miracles. And because of that, they were following Jesus Christ. But when Jesus started getting down into the word of God and start preaching, you have to eat my flesh and drink my blood. And the saying was so hard. In verse 60 it says, many therefore of his disciples, when they had heard this, said, this is an hard saying. Who can hear it? When Jesus knew in himself that his disciples murmured at it, he said unto them, did this offend you? So he asked them a question, did this offend you? So most people are preaching, they're afraid to offend people. If you're afraid to offend people while you are preaching, get out of the church. Get out of the pulpit. Give up that job. It's not for you. God did not call cowards. Many people are going to hell. Every few minutes, people are dying and going straight down to hell because they have not heard the gospel, because they do not know the word of God. They do not know the commandments of God. They do not know the ways of God, because these fake pastors and those imposters and charlatans, they are not preaching biblical doctrine to these folks. And many of them are biblically ignorant. And they are afraid of preaching the gospel. They are afraid of preaching because they don't want to offend people. If you're afraid to offend people, get out of the pulpit. Because it's better to offend somebody to heaven than to flatter somebody to hell. The gospel must be preached. And the reason why they don't want to offend people is because they are not operating in the spirit. They are operating in their flesh. They are after money, fame. They want to be popular, but they are not standing up for God. Jesus says, it is the spirit that quickens. The flesh profited nothing, my friend. And the words that I speak unto you, they are spirit and they are life. The churches are dead. The people are dead because there's no word. There's no word of God. They are fleshly words. They have carnal words, but not the word of God, not the spirit of God. Because only the spirit can bring life. Only the spirit can produce life. If you have a fleshly preacher, a dead preacher, a carnal preacher, they can only produce carnal children. But if you have a spiritual preacher who is preaching the word of God, teaching the word of God, then he will produce spiritual children who will go after God and follow after Jesus Christ. We do not need any written sermons because the Word of God is already written in the Bible. Everything that God wanted us to say to His people are already written in the Bible. If you need to preach, open up the Word of God and preach the Word of God, the commandments, the doctrine of godliness, not prosperity, not about money, not to have your best life now, but to preach against sin, against fornication, sexual immorality, every sin that the world is introducing to your people. You need to preach against them. And if your pastors are not preaching against the flesh, they are not from God, and you need to depart from that congregation and find you a Bible-based church. It's not about entertainment. It's not about being happy in the church. The church was created so that you can escape going to hell.